Remember great religious horror movies like The Exorcist and The Omen? Well, now comes a new one, and it's a winner for sure. We'll be looking at 2021's The Unholy. Spoiler alert, for those that want to watch the film on their own time, links to the film are in the description. We open up to a group of settlers in 1845. A woman is heard panting, and a man comes up and hammers a mask onto her face. As we look through her eyes, we see her be lifted over a wildfire, and a priest comes forward and prays to contain her soul in a doll. Moments later, we see a charred body hanging from a dying tree. Then we hop ahead to present time, and we see Jerry buying a coffee while talking to his friend Max about a potential job. As he heads to Banfield, he shows up to a farmer's ranch to learn more about a possible weird story. He swears he thinks Satanists are mutilating his cows, but Jerry attributes it to his teenager branding them with the Metallica logo. Soon, Father Hagen appears and tells the farmer to remove the cows, but Jerry just wants a story. As he walks away, he starts to hear voices whispering to him. As he follows them, he's led to a dying tree with an alcove in the bottom of it. When he sees something shiny inside, he gets down to observe it, and he pulls out the doll from 1845. He sees that the doll has the date February 31, 1845 engraved on it, and the farmer pops up behind him and calls it a good luck doll. Jerry tries to set up a story, but in the process, he decides to break the doll so he can create a story. As he leaves the tree, we can hear the last gasp of a woman's voice. In town, Jerry grabs a bite to eat before heading back onto the road. As he drives down the empty roads, he starts to record his report for his employer about the story he's creating. As he reaches for his bottle of alcohol, a woman appears in the middle of the road, and he ends up crashing into a tree to avoid her. When Jerry gets out of his car to investigate the accident, he goes to find the woman he saw on the road, but she's nowhere to be found. Eventually, he sees her wandering through the woods, and he decides to follow her. Soon he finds himself back at the dying tree, and the woman is seen praying at the base of it. As he approaches her, he reaches out, and she turns to look at him before collapsing to the ground. Jerry carries the woman to the church nearby, and Father Hagen immediately recognizes Alice and lets them in. Hagen calls the doctor, and when Alice comes to, Jerry finds out that she's a mute. The doctor tells Jerry that Alice lives with Father Hagen, and Jerry tells her that he heard Alice praying at the tree. The doctor takes Jerry back into town, where she drops him off at the local hotel. The next day, Alice is seen in church praying to the statue of Mary, and Jerry gets in touch with Max to tell him about the story. When Max says he doesn't want that story anymore, Jerry tells him about Alice being a deaf-mute girl that ends up talking. Max likes the religious take on the story and gives him a chance to make it. Jerry heads to the church, where he spots Alice in the front row. During the service, Alice hears someone call her name behind her, then she gets up and walks out. All of the other young women in the congregation get up and follow as though they've heard someone speak to them as well. Alice goes outside and walks right up to the dying tree, where she sees light emanating from a spirit that smiles down to her. As Father Hagen reaches out, Alice speaks to them all. She tells them that the lady has a message for them, to come again tomorrow, and that her name is Mary. Everyone sees it as a miracle that Alice can hear and speak now, and the fact that she says it's a woman named Mary makes it even more believable. Alice goes with the doctor to take some tests to prove that she can hear and speak. Meanwhile, Jerry calls his friend Monica, who he tries to sell the story to, but she brings up that people lost their jobs over the last time he fabricated the story. That night, Jerry is haunted by hallucinogenic dreams of a mysterious woman rising from the stream and creeping over to him. When he wakes up, he looks up to see water damage that is leaking down on him. The next day, Jerry heads to the church, where everyone is gathered hoping to see another miracle. As Father Hagen comes out, he tells everyone that he asked Alice to stay inside, but Alice decides to come out on her own. As she makes her way back to the dying tree, she reaches out to touch it, and she's blessed with another message. Alice turns to a boy in a wheelchair, asks if he believes in miracles, and when he says he believes in Mary, she tells him to walk. As the boy goes to stand, he can't believe his own eyes as he puts one foot down and then another. As he stands and walks, he makes even more people a believer in Mary. Everyone kneels and says their Hail Marys, and inside the church, the statue of Mary cries tears of blood. Elsewhere, Bishop Giles speaks to other people in the area to speak about modern miracles. When Jerry asks if he believes Banfield could become a hub for miracles, he speaks about how the miracles must be confirmed. He says that Delgard is there to disprove the miracles, and if he can't, then they will confirm it as a miracle. Later, Bishop Giles, Delgard, and Jerry get some time to speak alone. When Jerry says he could be an unbiased reporter to suspect things, Bishop Giles sees the perks of having him, and he decides to use his connection to Alice as an advantage. As Father Hagen watches people build tents around the dying tree, he can feel the malicious energy that radiates from it. As he walks closer to the tree, he steps on the remains of the doll Jerry crushed earlier. As he examines it, the malicious spirit grows, takes form, and almost attacks Father Hagen when one of the workers comes in and disturbs her. Meanwhile, as Jerry and Alice have a one-on-one interview, Alice is almost spoken through by Mary to personally ask Jerry to spread the word of Mary, but Father Hagen interrupts them. He's worried that Jerry is just using Alice, and he swears that there could be malintent involved in these miracles. Later, Jerry heads back to his hotel room where he goes over other interviews that point to a dark history in the town of Banfield. The next day, during Alice's test, Father Hagen has a heart attack, and Alice asks him to pledge his soul to Mary. As he agrees to do just that, Alice reaches out to his chest and heals him of his emphysema, but when he looks behind Alice, he sees the dark spirit called Mary. At the doctor's office, after Father Hagen gets examined, the doctor explains that his illness has been completely cured. Now that the dying tree of Banfield has become a holy shrine, so many people are excited about the miracles, but others would rather God stay in heaven. As Jerry gets a call from Monica about coming back to the company, he makes some demands that sound outrageous, but he knows that he has the in that they need. Father Hagen believes that Alice would be better off if she was sent away from all of the craziness that's surrounding the town now. Before she leaves, Alice tells Jerry that Mary is happy he's covering her story because now her word is getting out to all sorts of people. Elsewhere in the church, Father Hagen discovers an old journal hidden away in the stone wall. As he peruses through it, he sees writings that support something other than God is at work here. Back at the town bar, Jerry sits down with the doctor and tells her about the doll he was gonna use to fabricate a story when he first got there. When she hears this, she says that the dolls weren't only for good luck. When a doll was tied in a chain and an impossible date was written on it, it was used to trap souls. Jerry realizes what he broke might just have held an evil spirit that he's seen in his dreams. As Jerry takes a walk with the doctor, he starts getting terrible visions that make him want to speak with Father Hagen. Back at the church, Father Hagen catches a glimpse of a mysterious figure creeping into the confessional. As he performs the woman's confession, he hears her speak about how she's there for his soul. The figure speaks about how Satan gave her the ability to perform miracles, and Father Hagen panics. When he leaves the confessional, he sees the spirit floating over the church auditorium, and it reaches out to take him. When Jerry enters the church, he notices something is off. He hears a knock coming from the confessional, but when he opens it, he finds nothing. When he turns around, he finds Father Hagen hanging from the rafters. Jerry questions why he would commit suicide, but Bishop Giles asks him to keep quiet about it. Jerry heads out to interview Alice, but Alice still says Mary wants her work continued. When Jerry asks if she thinks the devil is at play here, she stands up for Mary so much that she speaks to her again. That night at Jerry's hotel, he sees a vision of the real entity that's calling herself Mary. When he goes back to his room, he goes over the recordings of Alice's interview and he notices a distortion in the clip. He plays it frame by frame and a figure begins to be seen clearer. The next day is Father Hagen's service, and Jerry and the doctor head down to the basement of the church to investigate what might have really happened. They go through the files that are held there, and Jerry comes across a notebook that Father Hagen discovered. They find out that the spirit that was burned and captured in 1845 belonged to a woman named Mary, and she performed miracles back then until she was killed by the community. As the service goes on in the church, Alice interrupts the service because Mary asks everyone to hold a service at the shrine that night. It's now that Jerry realizes what's really going on, and he feels the presence of Mary in the basement with them. As they escape Alice, they decide that they have to warn Alice of who is giving her the power to make miracles. When Jerry goes to Bishop Giles about the history of Banfield, he admits to knowing about the history of Mary from the first miracle occurring. After hearing about the reception that is to be held that night, Jerry begs him not to let it go forward, but Bishop Giles refuses. After more research, Jerry finds out that Alice is actually a descendant of Mary, and Mary made a pact to live forever through her children. Apparently, Mary doesn't want him finding out more because she burns the computer and appears to him in the statue of Mary. Just when it looks like Mary has Jerry, Delgard appears and prays protection over them, and Mary is removed from the premises. That night, the community gathers to pray to Mary while Jerry prepares with his group to stop them. As Bishop Giles begins the ceremony, he pledges his soul to Mary and turns to include everyone in his prayer to her. Meanwhile, Delgard prepares the doll for Mary's soul, but he's stopped by Mary, who kills him with a flaming cross. Back at the shrine, Alice reaches out to the people, and she asks them all to pledge their hearts to Mary. Just as she's about to claim everyone's souls, Jerry speaks about how the miracles are a lie. As Jerry speaks to the people, the doctor tries to reason with Alice. As Alice realizes they're telling the truth, she tells the people that Mary is fake, and Mary doesn't take kindly to that. Mary sets the tree on fire, and everyone that was healed is sick once again. As Mary's soul breaks free of the burning tree, she turns her rage on Bishop Giles before turning her attention to Jerry and Alice. Mary toys with Jerry until Alice sacrifices herself to save him. When Mary strikes Alice, she ends her line and disintegrates. In a last attempt to save Alice, Jerry reaches out to God and begs for him to let Alice live. As though his prayer was answered, Alice comes to, but she is deaf and mute once again. As Jerry goes to leave town, he stops at the church to say goodbye to Father Hagen properly. After recognizing the miracle that truly happened in front of him, the three of them leave the cemetery as the statue of Mary weeps blood once again. In a time when religion has been overused in horror, this is a fresh take on the situation of false prophets, and it was one of the most well thought out malevolent spirits we've had in quite some time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.